I want to start with that Monday morning after the Saudi attacks. We spoke over the phone when prices were surging. You were in Baghdad then. Yet today, we have prices lower than we were before that attack, where 5% of oil supplies were wiped off the market. Is there just too much oil in the market right now?
Yes, I recall that Monday when markets opened after the unfortunate incident in Saudi Arabia, we saw prices skyrocket by nearly 19% to 20% and then receded. This was not unexpected, considering the magnitude of the attacks and the volume lost at that time, 50% of Saudi production. We're glad that we have put that behind us. The Saudis have risen to the challenge. They have restored supplies in record time, in our opinion. And the market is now more focused on the global economy and the trade talks between the United States and China.
Given that environment, what action does OPEC and OPEC Plus need to take when you meet in December in Vienna?
There is a fundamental difference between the conditions that we found ourselves in 2015, 2016, and what we have now. I'm beginning to see some narratives, some correlations, but I want to put it very clear. 3 years ago, we had no mechanism to address the huge imbalance in the market. We arrived at the Declaration of Cooperation, a framework to continuously adjust supplies in order to maintain balance in the market. And this mechanism has been tested in the last 3 years. It has worked, and we remain committed to using the tools of this mechanism to ensure that this market remains in balance. And therefore, there is no cause for alarm. The OPEC and the OPEC Plus in the Declaration of Cooperation are all committed not to allow the situation to relapse to what we had before the Declaration of Cooperation.
And you've been speaking to a lot of these countries, and you said for them all options are on the table. Does that mean OPEC is going to cut deeper than the current deal we have now?
It would be premature for me to say at the moment, because the conference will hold on the 5th and on the 6th of December. But from my discussions, from my consultations among most of these members, they remain committed that we should put all options on the table. We must continue to navigate through this volatility that we are seeing, which is largely being driven by factors outside the supply and demand metrics.
But then at the very least, then you're likely to extend this current deal for the first half of next year.
If you recall, in July, the conference, in their wisdom, decided not to extend it to December of this year, but to the end of Q1 next year, and for good reason. And now we are seeing the wisdom behind that decision. So we already have this decision in place that will last until 31st of March next year. But when we meet in December, we're going to review 2019 with real data now, and the data for 2020 would be near real at that time. Therefore, the decision that will be taken there will be an informed one.
We just had the OPEC report come out. What was in it was that demand was 2.5 million barrels a day, more than supply. This was, of course, reflecting the attacks in the kingdom. But what I want to ask you is, are you seeing that Iraq and Nigeria are complying?
I was just coming from Iraq, and I had met with the leadership in Iraq. And the leadership reassured me that they will continue to comply fully with their obligations. They are conscious of their status within OPEC. They are the second biggest producers behind Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They are founder member of OPEC. they are very conscious of the consequences of not complying. And we have started seeing the numbers in that direction.
We just literally had a headline out now on the Bloomberg terminal about Saudi Aramco going to IPO. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think now is the appropriate time for the kingdom to bring the company public? We see investors literally running away from big oil.
Well, they have worked very hard in the last couple of years to prepare Aramco for this IPO, one of its kind. And I think for them to take a decision to move on, they must have evaluated the entire environment. They have very capable hands and have decided that this is the best time.
Do you think they'll change how they deal with OPEC? Because obviously they'll be a public company now. So you have a ministry separate from Aramco, the company.
Not at all. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia remains committed to OPEC as a founder member, as a de facto leader, as you call them in the media. And we have heard from the highest levels of government in Saudi Arabia that the IPO will not in any way affect their membership of OPEC. You
mentioned, my final question, you mentioned about there's so many things going on that are not actually affecting supply and demand. If you could hope, or OPEC, what are you looking for? Is it a trade deal, better manufacturing numbers out of Europe and Asia? What is it that you think would turn this market around? We are looking at a variety of macroeconomic issues, chief of which, of course, is the trade talks. Today, the U.S. and the Chinese delegations are meeting in Washington, and we are cautiously optimistic that some form of agreement will be reached, which will be in the best interest of the global economy.